Hi guys, I'm live. I don't think I don't think this video is totally nonsense. It's about music theory, but it's very unconventional. But that does not make it true or useful. I mean, that does make it untrue or not useful, whichever way I said that. I want to talk about the modes, but I want to talk about them from a very unique angle or perspective. The modes came from ancient Greece. The names of them did. And somewhere along the Dark Ages, the names got changed to the wrong modes. The names got renamed incorrectly, and then they just kind of stuck. And we kept, even when someone noticed they weren't named right, they just kept it because people were already used to it. Well, I'd like to talk about the original names, not just what we use today, and not just what we accept because a change happened that grew on us, and then we just kept it that way. The only mode that's correctly named is Aeolian. That's the mode in the white keys in the piano. That's starting and ending on A, the note A. That mode was actually Aeolian in ancient Greece. But if you go from A to B all the way up to A again, and then from A to G and down to A again, all the other modes are reversed. So let me explain that. From A to B. B, we call B Locrian, but actually if you go down from A to G, what we call Locrian was actually what used to be Locrian is what we call Mixolydian. So it was G Locrian and it was B Mixolydian. That were, like I said, going from A up and A down, they're all reversed. So what we call Locrian was actually Mixolydian. And now why did they call it Mixolydian? Well, I'll get to that. Then if you go from A to C, what we call Ionian was actually Lydian. And if you go from A down to F, what we call Lydian was actually Ionian. So it was C Lydian and F Ionian. Like I said, up and down from A, reversed. The modes were reversed. Now if I go from A to D, what we call Dorian was actually called Phrygian. And if we go from A down to E, what we call Phrygian was actually Dorian. So it was D Phrygian and E Dorian. So the actual names of the modes starting on A going upward were A Aeolian, B Mixolydian, C Lydian, D Phrygian, E Dorian, F Ionian, G Locrian, and A Aeolian. Now I'm going to explain in a minute why B was called Mixolydian, but before I do that, I don't know if any of this is Googleable. I don't know if you can prove any of this on Google, but I know it's a fact. I've read, I've studied before Google even was here. When I first dropped out of Harvey Mudd, I got every music theory book in my town and got music theory books from colleges, and I read and studied music theory for a long time. I had nothing else to do with my brain. I wanted to keep it active, so I studied music theory. And I know this fact is true. If you can Google it, great. If not, I'm still right. But now, why was B called Mixolydian? Well, remember, like I said, C was called Lydian, and B was the weird mode with the diminished fifth that had a diminished triad on it. So they didn't want to give it its own name because it didn't stand on its own as a mode. We called it B Locrian, but actually it was B Mixolydian. It didn't deserve its own name, so because it was one step lower than Lydian, which was C, they just called it Mixolydian, because every time you played B, you'd always just go up to C and play C, really. You wouldn't really play from B to B for that much, so they just called it. So since it mixed so well with what was C Lydian, they called it B Mixolydian. So actually, the only mode that doesn't have its own name, which is Mixolydian, was not G, it was B. It's because it didn't stand on its own, and it tended to get just shoved up to C Lydian. So they just decided to call it Mixolydian. Nobody ever used it, really. So once again, let me repeat what the modes used to be. What they actually were. The true names were A Aeolian, B Mixolydian, C Lydian, D Phrygian, E Dorian, F Ionian, G Locrian, and A Aeolian. Believe me or not, but that's what they really were. And then some person, I'm not going to use a cuss word, probably somebody from the Roman Catholic Church. I don't know that. It was around that era when they were really popular and ruled the world. Somewhere in that ilk or area, somebody wrote them down backwards or something, or just made a mistake and started right on A, but then wrote them in reverse order from there. And the person must have had authority, or must have been writing a book, or the person must have been one of the first people to talk about him or bring him out from the Greek days, that they just took his word for it, his or her word for it, or he had authority and they just let it go, or he had authority and they believed him. But anyway, at any rate, at some point, it had been around long enough that when someone pointed out the error, it was too late. They just decided to keep it the way we have it today. Love you guys. Peace, rock and roll.